Thanks everyone, and thanks the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So I'm Surat, I'm from Humane World for Animals, and today I'll be talking about non-animal methodologies and chemicals and agrochemical testing, and what is the status in India and what is the global regulatory status about these technologies. So just before I get into that, I'll just speak a few slides on what exactly Humane World does. So we are a non-government organization, and we work globally across different countries to enable the use of technologies that are more relevant to humans and reduce the reliance on animal models for safety testing and biomedical research for drug and vaccine development. And we work in collaboration with industry, lawmakers, researchers, regulators, and all the end users of these technologies to kind of bring about this change. And our approach has been, several speakers before me have spoken about collaboration. So our approach has been on similar lines, where we try to build partnership with different stakeholders, and kind of, because like many speakers have also said, like mostly a lot of stakeholders work in silos. So we try to bring them together and see how we can work together to bring about a sustainable change in this area. And some of the ways are, we try to increase funding, because, funding kind of is one of the key drivers of innovations. How can we increase funding for these emerging human relevant technologies? How can we build stakeholder capacity? Regulatory acceptance, that is also one of the points which was raised, like how, because if there are new emerging technologies, there also needs to be a regulatory pathway and increased acceptance for those technologies. How can we, so once, even if the acceptance is there, we need to promote the use of those tools amongst the end users. And often there is a bias towards the existing tools, like it could be animal models or existing traditional models that have been used. So how do we reduce the perceptions or bias towards those and increase confidence and trust in the newer methods that are coming up? And of course, modernize the laws and regulations which can incentivize the use of these technologies. So one such collaboration is this animal-free safety assessment collaboration, also called the HWA collaboration, where we work, it's a multi-sectoral partnership between non-profit, corporate, and philanthropic leaders, again to advance the acceptance of use of animal-free safety science globally. And we work across different sectors of cosmetics, chemicals, and medicines. These are some of our current partners. I mean, they range from different corporate sector and also regulatory bodies. So just highlighting some of the impact that we've had since 2019. So again, because we work globally, we have been able to achieve how moving away from cosmetic, animal testing in the sector of cosmetics, for example, in Mexico, Brazil, Canada, and in 11 US states. We've also been able to, again, it's not our effort alone. We kind of work with all stakeholders, end users, and regulators to kind of see how we can delete or waive off obsolete animal tests for biologicals. And we've also, in a collaborative venture, developed the HWA Masterclass, which is a very detailed state-of-the-art course, which kind of tells you what are the different elements that one needs to know about, safety assessment of chemicals. These are some of the current, we have a global science committee, and these are some of the members who are a part of that. As you can see, it has corporate, companies as well as regulators like EU JRC, and then Health Canada, and then US regulatory bodies. So many of them are many of the participants are from such different stakeholders. And we also work extensively on in the vaccine sector in India, specifically on the batch safety testing, where there are several new technologies which are in vitro and they are based on human biology. And we are working with major vaccine manufacturing companies in India like Serum Biological E, Bharat Biotech, Indian Immunologicals, to see how we can move away from those methods to newer methodologies, which are again, on the lines of sustainability. Because one of the methods, one of the technologies, for example, is the endotoxin testing method, which uses the blood of horseshoe crab. And there are newer technologies which use recombinant proteins. So we are trying to see how we can shift from, the test which is based on horseshoe crab blood to the newer recombinant methods, which is again, on the lines of sustainability and also more specific, because those tests which are based on animal models are often more variable because of the inherent, biological variability which is present. So yeah, so we work with different, in the vaccine sector, we work with different vaccine companies and also the regulatory authorities to kind of bring about also, acceptance for these methods. So just to kind of highlight, like, how do we kind of work towards this regulatory transformation? So the first step is, of course, we identify which different phases, like for which are the tests for which the replacement exists, because of course we don't have alternative methods which are based on in vitro technologies or newer technologies for all the tests right now. So it is not possible to shift right now to completely move away from animal methods. So practically and realistically, we have to identify which are the tests for which we have non-animal technologies which have been developed globally, for example, and which have received regulatory acceptance to some level. The second phase is tests for which there are methods which are currently in development or undergoing validation. The third phase are tests for which currently, either they are not there or they are still in research or in, very early technology readiness levels. So that is the first step where we identify which are these tests. And then, the phase one would have like a shorter focus where we can plan to see, for the tests for which already alternatives exist, how can we kind of, enable the use and adoption of that in the next 1 to 3 years, for example. And then for the tests which are undergoing validation, how can we accelerate that? And the tests for which where there are no replacement currently available, how can we, again, accelerate the R&D itself of that? So yeah, so again, just a kind of a stepwise manner to achieve this regulatory transformation. So the first step would be to kind of, like I said, understand what is the current status of, the regulatory status and the current, and to understand what is the scientific and regulatory readiness of the non-animal approaches for the chemical risk assessment. The next step is then we work with, different partners and create dialogue and different, amongst different stakeholders to, design platforms for how we can, adopt them and then increase their acceleration and accelerate their adoption. The next step is, we need to have the proper regulatory environment also to increase their adoption, because in many cases, even if the method is there, there is often a lack of clarity in the regulatory language, which kind of inhibits the end users to adopt. So, the last step is, of course, unless you have regulatory acceptance, you can't really have, adoption. So, yeah, so these are some of the, we have done a kind of a landscape study globally and in India. So, like, we have identified which are the tests, for example, these are some of the tests which are, which I've highlighted, which do have approved alternatives by OECD. I'm sure many of you know it's an international body which has guidelines for different kinds of toxicity tests that needs to be done. So there are OECD approved methods which are available for some of the tests which are labeled in green, and then some of the ones which are in yellow, they are still in progress, and the ones which are in red are still other, the tests which still need to be developed. So we also did an assessment to understand for the cases where there are alternatives available, what is the status of acceptance in India and adoption and awareness in India. So, like some of the like the main top tests are tests to assess, for example, skin irritation and eye irritation, which is to see whether any chemical or agrochemical can it cause skin irritation. Like if there is a pesticide, if it comes in contact with human skin, can it cause skin irritation? Similarly, eye irritation, can it cause is it an irritant to the eye? Then another is skin sensitization. So for these methods, we do have now, human-based alternatives where you can grow human skin in a petri dish, and then it's called a reconstructed human epidermis, and it's a completely validated tool which is available. And the in vivo method, like the animal assay is, for example, you have to, put the drop or, the whatever chemical that you're trying to test in a rabbit eye, for example, which is called the trace test for eye irritation, which is, obviously inhumane. But then when there are, alternatives present which are more relevant to humans, because you have like a human-based method to kind of test some of these endpoints. So we did see that in India. So we did a survey in collaboration with GPC India, and which included 8 agrochemical companies and 14 CROs. And we did find that in India, there are very few companies and CROs which are adopting these in vitro methods. And almost all of the companies and CROs in India are still doing the in vivo method. By that I mean the animal method, despite the presence of the in vitro method, which is an approved in vitro method. So, and similarly, this is again another endpoint, which is skin sensitization, again for which there are approved alternatives. So we also try to understand what challenges are the companies currently facing to make this shift towards non-animal methods. So one of the top reason was a lack of clear advisory in the regulation. So currently, like, there are pesticide guidelines which do not clearly state that if if non-animal data is submitted, it would be accepted by the regulator. So there is a lack of clarity in the guidelines which was stated by the end users. And another point is the cost of in vitro methods. So I think many of some of my speakers have also raised this point, that the entire supply chain of any new technology currently is not built in India, which increases the cost of these methods. Like, for example, if you're trying to build a reconstructed human skin, all the reagents, everything that goes into it, we kind of get it from outside India, which increases the cost. But outside, the cost of these methods is actually cheaper than the in vivo method, the animal method. So, but in India, because the entire supply chain is not in India itself, that kind of increases the cost. And there are some of the other methods are, lack of training, lack of awareness. People are not aware that these methods exist, and there are not enough trained people to kind of work with those tissues and new technologies. So, but then I also want to highlight that globally, there is a paradigm shift which is happening in the last few years. Almost all major countries have announced roadmaps to shift away from animal testing to more relevant human-based technologies. So one aspect is about, of course, the point of it being more humane, but the fact is that these in vitro methods, they are based on human cells, they're based on human biology, so they also make it more precise and more predictive, because animal models, if anyone would have worked in the field of toxicology or with animal models in general, we know that they are subject to a lot, biological variability, like how we do. Like, for example, I think all of us in COVID saw that no two people responded to, either the medication or the virus in a similar way, right? So we all behave we have inherent biological variability. So that, and we are trying to capture that in a lab-grown animal model, which often, fails. In many cases. Of course, it's not to say that they have not given great insights, but those models were born when we didn't have any alternative. With the advent of all the new emerging technologies and AI and the computational tools, now we have the potential to kind of replace them with more cutting edge, more precise, more human relevant technologies. So these are some of the roadmaps and initiatives that have globally been released. The US Environmental Protection Agency released a framework to assess eye irritation and corrosion using entirely non-animal methods. Similarly, US FDA recently in April released a roadmap to say that they are going to shift away from animal studies to more human relevant technologies. In fact, NIH said that any new grant that they are going to give, it has to have a human relevant component, and if it's going to be completely based on animal biology, they are not going to fund it. Similarly, UK very recently, I think just a few weeks back, came up with again a roadmap to say that how animal testing is going to be phased out, and they're going to bring in more emerging technologies. EU had its They are also coming up with a roadmap specifically for chemical safety assessment. So globally, this shift is happening. And in India, we have the potential to kind of embrace this change or lead it. In fact, if we kind of also embrace and develop some of these technologies in India. So just to kind of end on the note that, towards moving towards more innovative, sustainable, human relevant testing methods, how can we do that? So what we are trying to do is how we can work with regulators, with companies and CROs who are the end users, and also startups and academia. Like some of them said that, because these are new technologies, human reconstructed epidermis or human reconstructed cornea. So currently, there are commercial companies outside which are manufacturing, but the price point of that is too high for a wider adoption in India. So there are two ways to go about it. One is we develop these technologies in India. We have our own homegrown, technologies which would bring the price point down significantly, or if we increase the demand and increase the scale, which can also, eventually bring down the cost, because right now the awareness about it is very low. So, there are two ways to kind of how we can tackle the cost aspect. And the other part is the regulatory acceptance, because if you saw the previous slide, right, there is a clear regulatory a message from the regulators that they are accepting of any new method that is submitted. So that kind of messaging should be given out by Indian regulators also. There is some level of messaging in the pesticide guidelines, but if we can make it more stronger so that end users feel more confident to kind of submit any data using these methods. So and from our side, we also try to, because we are a global team and we have a wide range of expertise globally, we try to share that global expertise and successful case studies and bring that to India to see, to increase trust in these new methods and have more data sharing, which is also another component of any new method. Because if any new success story is being developed, so unless that data is shared, that trust will not be built. So that's another way where we try to kind of combat this. So with this, I'll just end, and yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone.